I'm Mark Peikert. I'm the editor-in-chief of Playbill. I'm excited to be out of the office and be with three awesome people to talk about this awesome movie that you guys just saw. So without further ado, Kumail Nanjiani, Emily V. Gordon, and Zoe Kazan.
Hello, everyone.
I know.
Every time.
Welcome, guys.
Hello.
Hi.
I feel like I'm serving tea.
Is
Could
this-
I
is
offer
this-
you some water from?
Mic isn't on.
Maybe try
Is
it.
my mic on? Great. Will you guys tell us if Emily and I are flashing you?
It's always the thing. We were just saying these high chairs and skirt situations. These are things men don't have to think about.
If you
And here
guys
we are.
want to like turn your chairs away,
Sit like this.
yeah. Oh no, there's a hole right where
Yeah,
what
please
you're
don't
trying
do
to hide is.
Well, we're promoting the movie, right? Whatever we can do. Sorry.
Hey guys, this has already taken a turn that I'm super into.
No.
Congratulations on the movie, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you all for coming to see it.
So it came out over the summer, and then you guys have been doing press for a while. So before we even talk about the movie, I'm just curious what your wildest press experience has been so far.
This one.
Threatening to flash people in the audience? Yeah, that one. That's up there. Have we had a wild press experience?
I don't think those words go together.
Wild.
A wild press experience. Ooh.
Then I'm glad I could be your first.
Yeah. Have we?
Let's
had-
make this one the wildest
All right.
somehow.
Gauntlet thrown. I'm into it. So just to get into the movie, I mean, Emily and Kumail, you guys are married, and this is based on your real life, in case any of you did not know that already. So what prompted you to sit down and write a movie versus a play or versus a web series or any other medium?
Well, I'd love to be able to write a play, but that's not something I've ever done before. We'd have to consult Zoe on that, and we wouldn't have known her then because we met her through the movie. So, yeah, we'd never written a screenplay before. We both written TV stuff, and I think this kind of felt like a story that had, despite the fact that it's based on it, hello, sir. Despite the fact that it's based on our lives, it felt like it had a distinct beginning, kind of middle and end. It had somewhat of a structure. And so we like the idea of telling a story that we could tell as one discrete story and not as an ongoing, like, let's see what Emily and Kumail are up to in season 3. So I think it was always going to be a movie. Yeah.
Yeah, because like as Emily said, we knew that we knew where we wanted the story to start, and we kind of knew where we wanted it to end. And Judd was the one who sort of was like, I think we should try and make a movie of this. We tried to talk him into making it as a YouTube web series, as you suggested, but Judd doesn't go online very much.
I mean, YouTube's where it's at. I mean, this is where this is going to
That's
live.
right. We love you, YouTube.
So how heavily involved was Judd in terms of the script?
Pretty involved. I would say at first we would write drafts of the script every few months and bring them into him every few months. And for the first, I'd say maybe year or so, he never even opened the script in front of us. I'm sure he read it on his own time, but he would just talk about what movies should and shouldn't be. So we were getting
He
very
would say
grand.
things like, movies should have a story and characters that make sense.
Yeah.
And we were like,
Yeah. At
this
first
is all
we were
good.
getting kind of real macro notes.
Yeah, we should be writing this down.
Yeah, real macro notes.
A movie script shouldn't be full of typos or written in crayon.
And then gradually they got more and more kind of focused and more micro, and he started opening the script in front of us, and would point to, this is wrong. And we'd be like, yes, that's correct, that is wrong. And it was like that every few months. We would just, we would kind of work on a draft and really believe in it. And then when we would leave, he would have given us so many suggestions of things to try that he really kind of beat into us, like, just try anything. Just like, don't limit yourself. Just do some experimenting with the script and see where it can go, which is what we did.
Yeah, it was a lot of rewrites, and they were sort of spearheaded by Judd and Barry Mendel, the other producer. So, yeah, they were very, very instrumental the entire time.
How long was the writing process versus the filming process?
The filming process was 25 days.
Yes.
The writing process was
Four.
basically it was, yeah, I would say it was 4 years up until the
4-ish.
day we started shooting. But we sort of at some point in that gotten funding and cast Zoe and the other actors, and we sort of did rewrites.
For that final year. So 3 years
Yeah.
of just writing, and then the last year was with the cast and our director kind of retooling it based on all of their input and thoughts.
Zoe, what input and thoughts did you have as a professional writer yourself?
Well, you know, Judd has this very unusual methodology where he sort of, once actors are cast, brings them in to do these long rehearsals that are sort of like brainstorming sessions too. Like we would do like the scene where we're in the grocery store, and then we would do it like what happens if you do it but you don't fight, and then like what happens if you do it but you're in a Trader Joe's and you're shopping for cheese. Okay, it's a wine store instead.
right.
Like and then like I think like the wine store version of that scene actually produced the scene where we're tasting wine and
That's right.
and having a discussion about my marriage,
Yes.
Emily's marriage.
Emily's marriage.
Yeah, Emily's. So like weird fruit comes off of that tree, and there were times that like I think we would improv around something and end up with exactly what was on the page to start
Yeah.
with, and then there were times that like whole new scenes were produced because of those improvs or because of those conversations or questions that were coming up. And I think for me, when I read the script, there was a lot that was in flux around Emily. Like her parents were about to be heavily rewritten for Holly and for Ray, and I think that gave a sort of feeling that there was some flexibility around Emily's character, and so I was being encouraged. I feel like I normally wouldn't have felt as encouraged to give my input or my questions. I think I asked more questions than I gave input. Like, well, why does she behave this way? And like that, for instance, that like whole marriage discussion came because I was like, well, why doesn't she notice that her boyfriend is such a commitment phobe? Like, where is she? And then I was like, well, where was Emily in her real life? And Kumail was like, well, she'd just been divorced. And I was like, why isn't that in the script?
And Emily were just sitting
Emily
quietly
was
in the corner.
Wow.
Well, let's get to work. Yeah.
No, it was just it was fun. It was a funny. I have so much respect for writers that I think I am usually very delicate and like not wanting to tread on any toes, and it was strange to me to be like invited in this way. And I have to say that like watching Emily and Kumail like be so generous as to like open it up and want input and welcome it and not react defensively, like I think it actually made everybody else want to give a piece of themselves as well to like meet that energy.
Yeah, and a lot of those scenes, like the scene that she's talking about with the wine and her telling me that she was divorced, or even the breakup scene, a lot of that did come out of improvs and stuff that we did, me, real Emily, and real Zoe.
Yeah, but then you'd be listening to tapes of like 4 hours of improv and make a scene out of it. It wasn't like, one for one.
No, but there was certain, we would try it different ways, and then you would feel like, oh, wow, that one felt really good. And we did record all of them and sort of go through and figure out what we wanted to put into the script. Because the thing is with Judd, when Judd's making a movie, he can spend a whole day on one scene and improv, excuse my language, improv the fuck out of it. With us, we only had
25 days.
Yeah, so we had to really get a lot of pages every day. So we had to go in knowing there was some improv on set, but mostly we went in knowing exactly what we needed to get.
Was that something that you took into consideration with casting, looking for people who would be able to contribute in that way and during rehearsals?
Definitely for the comedian friends of Kumail's, we really wanted actual comedians, both because it's easier to have, it's hard to teach someone how to do stand-up on camera, but also, we got a lot of free labor because they all wrote their own stand-up material. Because that would have been, we would kind of tell them, your character is like the brash truth teller guy, you're kind of the dumb guy who's never going to get out of here. And then they wonderfully wrote like a few minutes of material for themselves each that kind of fit in that zone, which was really, really helpful.
And we had incredible extras those days who laughed through everything.
Or didn't laugh, which was fine too.
Yeah. We didn't really give them any instruction. We were like, just react as you would react if this stand-up comedy was happening to you.
To your face.
Yeah.
I'm picturing the guys who are bombing, like, oh no, you're paid extras. You can't even get paid to laugh. That's brutal. Emily, was there ever a moment where you considered playing Emily?
Not a moment. It's best left to professionals, which I am not. And I was more than happy. I could have really tanked this whole thing. We certainly would not have been here right now. I was more than happy to let this be a professional take over. And if you've got to have someone play you in a movie, it should be Zoe Kazan. That is my main piece of advice for everyone.
For everyone?
Everyone. Literally everyone.
I mean, Zoe's great, but I see some people here who Zoe couldn't play in a movie.
Honestly, I don't think you should discount her skills. She's a chameleon.
And Zoe, how did you first get involved? Like, what drew you to the story?
When I read the script, I felt like I had never seen that movie before. And I think in particular the tonal blend, like we had talked a lot about broadcast news in our rehearsal process and as a kind of tonal target. But you just don't read that. Honestly, I don't read that many scripts that are very good. And it was very well written and seemed interesting and unlike other things. And I got to audition for it and I got lucky.
I want to hear more about the audition, but I have to ask what Holly Hunter, were you secretly talking about broadcast news away from Holly Hunter? Was she involved in those conversations?
Oh, I would ask her about broadcast news.
We were
I
not
had
cool
no
at all.
chill, yeah. It was just like, all right, so let's talk about your process. What can you teach me about acting, Holly Hunter? I really did. Once we got to know her, I asked her everything, and I did ask her about broadcast news.
Good.
Yeah.
As you should.
You have to.
She really loved working on broadcast news. That's the wisdom I have to impart.
But Zoe, what was the audition like? Were there actual scenes from the script? Was it just coming in and discussing the character?
Yeah, I think I was the last one to audition. The scenes were the breakup scene, and which was very different at that point, or not very, but different.
Yeah, and it was the first scene, the post.
Coital.
The post-coital
We
scene.
always call it the post-coital scene, and I don't know when that started, but yeah.
It's
Yeah.
the one where she's talking about people called her Beetlejuice and stuff. That scene.
Yeah, which was
Those two.
also different at that point, a little bit. And I prepared a lot. And I think I felt like, okay, if I really know this inside out, I don't need to do a lot of other kinds of preparation. I don't want to overthink it. I felt a sort of we're all actors here. I felt that heat feeling that you get sometimes when something is going right, when there's flow. My body felt hot in the room. And they encouraged me to improv, which I did a little bit.
Yeah, we did a little bit, yeah.
Not a ton, but I don't know. It just felt right. I walked out, I was like, well, it doesn't happen that often. I can count it on one hand, but sometimes you walk out and you're like, they should cast me probably.
And we heard her saying that out loud.
Yeah, to myself.
As she was leaving.
Yeah.
They should
She's got
cast me
confidence.
probably.
I actually, I feel like I've blacked it out. I don't remember who it was. I really don't. I'm not just saying that, but I did see an actress leave before me, and I remember being like, "Oh shit!"
Yeah.
If that person is reading, I'm really fucked. But
Turns out they were really fucked.
And
Thanks, Emily.
Emily, what was it like watching all these actresses come in and give their takes on the character based on you?
Well, I think I didn't go to the audition specifically because I did not want
Thank
that to happen.
God.
Yeah, I know,
Thank
right?
God. If I
feel-
had to flirt with your husband with you sitting right there,
Yeah.
very tough.
I wasn't even thinking about that angle. I was just like, well, I don't want them to see me and be like, oh, I should try to move my bangs over. I don't know. So I didn't go. I watched the tapes back later. But when I watched the tapes, that's when I was like, oh, I'm watching all these gorgeous actresses flirt with my husband over and over and over again. And him being like, Emily, let's go home.
yeah,
and
me calling them by your name.
Yep.
I remember.
We were
And they were like, so they were like, we auditioned a lot of people. It was like 20 people, and I came home and I was she just got the video, and I saw her in her office with the headphones watching, and I was like, I'm just gonna wait here. And as soon as she walked out, and I was like, how you doing, honey? And she was like, I'm gonna go for a walk.
I just needed a minute.
I was like, you do that.
And I went outside. I put my big girl pants on, and I was like, I want to write this movie. I want this. This is like my movie. This is part of it. Let's do this. But I did have like a momentary like, oh my God, what did I do? And we had a thing where we were walking home from getting a meal together, you and I, Kumail, and I was like, you understand, it's weird, right? And he's like, yeah, it's a little weird. I get it. But then, yeah, you kind of get over it after that. Yeah.
Well, then, were you and Zoe like hanging out during filming? Were you guys
All the time.
Well, when you're making a movie in 25 days, you're together all the time. And we, because of this like rehearsal process that we had, like I would come to LA and, sometimes Emily would be in the room and sometimes she wasn't, but it made me feel like we knew each other really well before I think we really did, because I was like advocating for us.
And like
And
I was,
she was-
when one of us
yes.
wasn't there, we were each advocating for
Right.
Emily when we weren't there. when the other
So
one was there.
it was like we had the same like project or goal, or like we were on a ship, just the two of us or something, in the middle of this like fleet of other ships, but we were both having to captain the ship together. And I think, to be totally honest, I feel a little bit like Emily's background as a therapist helped us, and like the fact that I've been in therapy for half my life, where I feel like we took really good care of each other in the process, and like if anything ever felt weird, we talked about it, and like things weren't allowed to fester. And I think that like by the time that we were like really embroiled in like the hard emotional work on set, we already had a lot of like good guidelines for ourselves,
That's
even
true.
if they weren't stated.
That's completely true. Yeah.
So did you, with 25 days, I don't know if this was even an option, but were you able to structure the shoot so that you had that buildup of trust?
Nah, dog.
Not at all. No, not a damn bit.
I saw the schedule, and the first day of shooting was me saying goodbye to Holly and Ray right after Emily wakes up. That was day one of shooting. And I was like, can that be day two? And they said, it'll be tough, but sure. So that was day two of shooting.
Your first shoot with your dad was saying goodbye to him. What's
Yeah,
your
my
final
first
scene
thing with
him?
my dad was
Yeah.
saying goodbye to him. I mean, that's the problem, if you're doing a big budget movie, you can sort of hold the hospital for the whole time. But the hospital was week one, and then there was another week at a different hospital later. So you sort of just, what was good was we'd done all these rehearsals. So I'd gotten to know Zoe and Holly and Ray and Anupam and everybody. So that was really helpful. We sort of had a relationship already, but still it's, when you're on set, you're sort of working on a slightly different kind of relationship because you're working together and there's all these cameras and stuff. So I was so intimidated by, we have legends in this cast. So it was really, if you can do it, shoot a movie in order. That would be amazing.
I've never done that. I've never
Yeah.
even approximated it.
I don't think there's a way unless you have like a huge budget.
Or like you're shooting like something in a motel room.
Yeah.
Or something like you have to have a dramatic weight loss or weight gain that you can like track everything
Yeah,
with.
but even that,
yeah,
like,
there's no way.
Well, before we do audience questions, which I have right here, is the rehearsal process something that you would push for on the next project? Was it that key to the
Definitely.
Yeah,
movie?
it's really good.
I think rehearsals are super important. I used to be, I started off doing stand-up comedy, and then when I started acting, I was kind of approaching it similar to that kind of, right? And I was always like, I shouldn't know my lines before I get because I wanted to feel fresh and all that. And I think that's all bullshit. I was just afraid of preparing. I think
Ooh, that's
rehearsal.
really nice to hear you say. I'm sorry. Go ahead. As your wife, I
Is
was
this
like,
being
ooh.
recorded? Stop. I really like the rehearsal process because then you can sort of go in and you know how it should feel, and then that actually allows you to be a little more free during the filming. You actually discover more. You're actually looser the more you've rehearsed and the more you know the scene.
Yeah, weirdly, I felt like my strange goal for myself on this movie was to think of it like a John Cassavetes movie. Like, how relaxed can I be? How close to myself and how close to life can I let this be? Rather than trying to like be funny or be charming or like reach the needs of the genre, like as we think of them. Yeah.
I think as a writer, the rehearsals are helpful because you want to believe you're advocating for every single character, but until actors come in that are actually inhabiting those characters and are like, well, I don't know if this makes sense, then you're like, yeah, you're right. That's something we hadn't, like, you want to believe you thought through every single angle, but
Yeah. And the other thing about that is that like, we like took the script apart in those rehearsals. Like we would look at every single scene and be like, what work is this doing? Could it be doing more work? Because especially like telling the story of like Emily and Kumail's like coming together, like we only had one act to do that in really. And so it was like every scene had to be doing a tremendous amount of work. And so by the time I got on set and we were actually doing the scenes, we knew what every piece was there for. So like you're not going on set being like, I think I'm going to be flirty in this scene. It's like, no, I know exactly what this scene is here for. It tells this chunk of the story. I need to be like dialed in emotionally in this way. And if I'm not, that piece isn't worth anything. And as a result, like there were things that got taken out in the editing process, but really what got taken out was like one whole thread. It's not like most of the scenes
that's true,
that are there in each thread of this were there in the script. And like there aren't things where I'm like, oh, we really didn't need those 3 scenes, turns out.
Yeah, for the most part, because Zoe's exactly right. Like she said, we had one act to get the relationship to get people to understand the relationship and to see these two people negotiating, getting to know each other. So each scene has to do a lot of work. Like each scene has to move their relationship to each other in some way. And because we watched a lot of romantic comedies. We watched good ones. We also watched not good ones, and we found what happened.
Which ones those are?
No, thank you.
Yeah, pass. In the not good ones, it always feels like the relationship was a little like, oh, they're in love because the movie's telling us they're in love because they walked on the beach or whatever, and you have these scenes of people just having fun, and you don't see
or montage, not even scenes.
Yeah. And I love montages. I really do. We have one here that shows in the first act that
and one in the third.
And one in the third, but the one in the first is the one that sort of shows a little bit the progression of the relationship, and it's sort of we keep coming back to me and her on the couch because we felt like that's one of the big things in like the progress of a relationship is when two people are just hanging out doing their own things.
Yeah. That was a big thing in our relationship that you were like, I have stand-up work to do. And I was like, I have work to do. Let's just sit in the house and do work together. And you were like, what?
Yeah. Not everything has to be like a date. You could just sort of hang out and do your own thing. And we felt like that was a big thing we wanted to convey in the progress of a relationship.
Well, speaking of stand-up work, look at that segue.
First
the
question.
first audience question is, how much of the stand-up material, and we covered this a little bit with the others, but for you, how much of the stand-up was in the script and how much was it from just in the moment?
Not much of it was really in the moment, except for the breakdown scene. A lot of that was in the moment. A lot of that was not scripted. But the actual stand-up, I actually went back and found my material from back then, and a lot of that is in the movie, because we wanted to show someone who's sort of trying to figure out how to be a stand-up and not the...
And I'll say it, Kumail is amazing at stand-up. And he actually had to go back to being a little bit worse at stand-up for the movie. And it made him crazy. To the extras, every single time he'd be like, I'm actually way better than this. You can come see me anytime. But yeah, it made you, because you had to be a little more timid. When I met you,
I was
you were
killing way
timid.
harder in between takes.
Yeah. You were more timid on stage back then. And we wanted to see a guy that is timid in all parts of his life, including stand-up. And so he had to go back to being little baby Kumail.
Yeah, so my stand-up was all written, but it was all sort of from that time. And it was Mike, actually, the director, who was like, we set up a show in New York and I did like a half hour for him to pick material to put in the movie. And he was like, you shouldn't feel so comfortable on stage. You should be less comfortable on stage. And if you notice, this is a very small thing. Nobody ever notices it, and it's fine. the only time I have the microphone in my hand is in the last scene of the movie. The rest of the time I have the microphone in the stand. And for me, when I was doing stand-up, that was a big step for me, was taking the mic out of the stand, because that's such a crutch. That's such a barrier between you and the audience. It's a safety net, yeah.
And then last question before we all have to leave for the afternoon, and I have to go back to the office. For the three of you...
Man, are we done with this wild press experience?
I know.
I'll take my shirt off.
This has been one of the craziest ones I've ever... I almost started talking about the craziest one I've ever had, but never mind.
We
don't need to bring Tova Feldsha into this conversation right now. Watch it on YouTube. She's lovely. I love her. She's great. It was just, she's very funny, and she's very, like,
Wild.
out there. Yeah. Hi.
Should we look it up online?
You went away for a second and then you came back.
I did. I'm back. So for the three of you in your respective careers, what is the advice that you wish that you had known when you were starting out?
We start on this end. That would be great.
No. Take the mic out of the stand. That actually was good advice that somebody gave me. I think, I think sort of believing that you can do it is really important, because it's a very tough business. It can be hard to get work, and it can be hard to get good work, and it can be easy to get sort of down on yourself. But I think it's, the performance that you can give in a thing, no matter if it's good or bad or whatever that means, only you can do that. Only you, even if you have a small part in something, only you can do it the way you can do it. And I think having that always in the back of your head is important. I think that only you have a monopoly on what you can do,
I have three tiny pieces of advice, and they really are the three things that I think about all the time that I wish someone had told me. The first one is watch your tapes when you make them. Know what you're sending out into the world. I was too embarrassed to do it when I first started out, and my work really changed, and my career really changed as soon as I started watching my tapes and being that weird thing I do with my mouth, and also the fact that I'm looking too far away, I'm placing the person too far away from the camera, and I'm all these tiny things. Really, I can't tell you the difference that it made for me, and it also made me own my work in a different way.
Do you also watching takes on set? No. Okay.
No one should do that.
No, but also I've worked on independent films where no one had time for that. The only times I've ever been on sets where people were doing that, it was movie stars are doing that, and I'm going to sit over here and let them do that, you know. The second thing is write for yourself, and find some you can take your own life in your hands. I think the feeling of being helpless as an actor is a very, very terrible feeling, and not everybody is going to be able to have their movie made and by producers who have money, but the means of production are in our hands now. Everybody has an iPhone. Look what Sean Baker did with Tangerine. You can do it yourself. And the last thing I would say is I really didn't understand for a really long time that being engaged in a profession where other people tell me if I'm pretty enough and good enough all the time was slowly eroding my sense of self. And I wish someone had earlier taken me by the hand and been find other sources of ego gratification. Your family is important, your life is important, showing up for that wedding is important. You don't have to take every job. You being a good cook, being a good friend, taking a walk, finding sources of pleasure. My life is way better now that I'm putting less emphasis on my career, and frankly it makes things the Big Sick has been a big thing for all of us, and at my Thanksgiving my relatives kept being or my extended family kept being don't you feel great, this big break? And I was I don't feel I think if I hadn't gotten my head straightened out 5 years ago, I would be everything's amazing. And right now I'm no, it's good, but also life is tough, and every year won't be like this. And I think it's very hard to have this up and down and have your life be outside of your own hands.
That's very good advice.
And Emily?
Yeah, exactly. As a writer, I'd say find other sources of ego gratification. No. I do think make sure that you are enjoying what you do, because I see a lot of people that are it's paining them to work, it's paining them to write, and if it's not. There are times when it's like an excavation of your soul. There's time that it's difficult. There's times you don't feel like writing. But if it's not a joy to do, then it's not for you. And as a person who's got a full master's degree and licensure in 3 states to be a therapist,
Why did you look at me?
Well, because you always make fun of me about my master's degree.
Oh, your 2 master's degrees?
I always say I actually have 2 master's degrees. It's fine. But I, that was my career. That was going to be my life.
And how many of those are you using right now?
0. But that's my point.
She's using them both all the time.
Is that it's okay to, if you have a dream and you want to do something, it's okay to start over. That's all any of us are ever doing over and over and over again. And I think if you're like, oh, I would love to act, but I've spent all this money and time getting this degree, whatever you got your degree in, there are parts of that you can take over into a new career. And there's certainly parts of being a therapist that I bring into writing and bring into being around famous people, because that is certainly necessary. And I just think it's never too late to start over, and that's all we're ever doing, so don't be afraid to do that.
Excellent advice. And that's all the time we have, so I'm going to go quit my job and start over somewhere else. And thank you guys so much for coming.
Thank you for coming, everyone. Thank you. Thank you.